I'm Caleb, a mechanic from a small town in Colorado. One night, after a long day of fixing cars, I was driving home from a repair job. The clock read past midnight, and the road was dark and empty. It was one of those nights where the quiet feels heavy, like something is just waiting to happen. As I rounded a bend, I saw a car parked on the side of the road with its hazard lights on. I'm the kind of guy who can't just drive by when someone might need help, so I pulled over and got out to check. The air was cool, and the only sounds were the crunch of gravel under my boots and the distant rustling of leaves. "Hello." I called out, but there was no answer. I walked around the car and saw that it was empty. The doors were closed, and there was no sign of anyone around. It felt odd, but maybe the driver had gone to get help. I glanced around, but there were no houses or buildings nearby, just trees and darkness. As I turned back towards my truck, I felt a chill run down my spine. You know that feeling when you just know you're being watched? I spun around, and there, standing behind me, was a figure. It was too dark to make out any features, just a shadowy outline. My heart jumped into my throat. "Hey, do you need help?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. No response. The figure just stood there, silent and still. The situation felt wrong, really wrong. I slowly backed away, keeping my eyes on the figure, and hurried to my truck. My hands were shaking as I fumbled with the keys. I jumped into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and took a deep breath. Just as I started the engine, I glanced up and saw the figure again, closer this time. Panic surged through me. I hit the gas and sped off, watching the rearview mirror. The car with the hazard lights was still there, but the figure was gone. As I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. Every time I checked the mirror, the same car was behind me. It kept a steady distance, never getting closer, but never dropping back. I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence, but it didn't feel right. After a few miles, I took a sharp turn onto a side road, hoping to lose the car. But when I looked back, there it was, still following me. My mind raced with questions. Who was in the car? Why were they following me? What did they want? No answers, just the unsettling feeling that I was in some kind of danger. I decided to head for the nearest gas station, hoping the lights and people would deter whoever was following me. As I pulled into the brightly lit parking lot, I looked in the mirror one last time. The car was gone. Just vanished. I parked and got out, scanning the area, but there was no sign of the car or the mysterious figure. I went inside, bought a coffee, and sat down to gather my thoughts. My hands were still shaking, and my heart was racing. I kept replaying the events in my head, trying to make sense of it all. But there were no answers, only more questions. Who was that figure? Why was the car following me? Was it all just some weird coincidence, or was there something more sinister going on? I didn't know, and that was the most disturbing part. As I sat there under the fluorescent lights, I couldn't shake the feeling that somehow I just narrowly escaped something terrible. And the worst part, I might never know what it was. I'm Nathan, and I never believed in ghosts or the supernatural. But what happened on that highway in Nevada still haunts me. I was driving home late one night, the road stretching out endlessly in the dark. It was the kind of night where you feel utterly alone, with only the hum of the engine for company. Out of nowhere, a motorcyclist sped past me, swerving wildly. He was going way too fast, barely staying in his lane. I remember thinking, this guy is going to kill himself. A few minutes later, I saw something up ahead on the road. My headlights illuminated a crumpled motorcycle and a figure lying next to it. I pulled over, my heart pounding. As I got out of the car, I yelled, "Hey, are you okay?" No response. The air was eerily silent, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I walked closer, But as I reached the spot where the bike and the rider should have been, there was nothing there. Just empty asphalt. I stood there, frozen. What just happened? I could have sworn I saw the motorcyclist. Did I imagine it? But it felt so real. I looked around, but there was no sign of a crash, no skid marks, nothing. Confused and a little scared, I hurried back to my car. My hands were shaking as I fumbled with the keys, desperate to get away from that spot. As I drove, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. The road behind me was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Then, out of nowhere, I saw him again, the motorcyclist, riding right behind me. My heart started racing. How could this be possible? I had just seen him, or had I? I sped up, trying to put some distance between us, but he matched my speed, staying just a few car lengths behind. My mind was racing with questions. Was he real? Was I losing my mind? I tried to think of a rational explanation, but nothing made sense. The motorcyclist's face was hidden behind his helmet, and he never made a move to pass me. He just followed, like a shadow. I tried to ignore him, telling myself it was all in my head, but every time I glanced in the mirror, he was there. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he vanished. One moment he was there, and the next, the road behind me was empty again. I kept driving, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station, the bright lights a welcome relief from the darkness. I got out of the car, my legs shaky, and looked around. No sign of the motorcyclist. I went inside and asked the attendant, "Did you see anyone else pull in? A guy on a motorcycle?" The attendant gave me a puzzled look. "Nope, just you." I stood there, trying to process what had happened. Had I imagined it all? But it felt so real. The image of the motorcyclist lying on the road, then following me, it was burned into my mind. Even now, I can't explain what I saw that night. Maybe it was a trick of the light, or maybe I was just tired. But deep down, I know what I saw was real. And that's the most disturbing part. Sometimes, I wonder if that motorcyclist is still out there, waiting to appear in someone else's rearview mirror. I'm Jake, and I've always prided myself on being calm under pressure. But that night in rural Texas still chills me. I was driving home from a late shift, the road ahead empty and silent. The only light came from my headlights cutting through the dark. Out of nowhere, a car appeared behind me, flashing its high beams. At first, I thought it was just some jerk trying to get me to speed up. But as I accelerated, the car stayed right behind me, continuing to flash its lights. My heart started to race. What did they want? Why were they following me? I glanced in the mirror and saw a shadowy figure behind the wheel. The flashing lights were almost blinding, making it hard to focus on the road. Should I pull over? Speed up? I decided to head for the nearest gas station, hoping the lights and people would help. As I pulled in, the car followed, stopping right behind me. A man got out, waving his arms and shouting. My heart was pounding. What was he saying? I rolled down my window a crack. "What's going on?" I called out. "There's a body under your car," he shouted back. My stomach dropped. "A body? What do you mean?" "Check under your car," he insisted. I hesitated, then got out, my hands shaking. I crouched down and looked underneath. My breath caught in my throat. There, clinging to the undercarriage, was a man. He was bleeding and whispering, "Help me, please." Panic surged through me. How had he gotten there? Who was he? I called 911, barely able to get the words out. The man from the other car tried to keep the injured man calm, but he was fading fast. The police and ambulance arrived quickly. They questioned me, but I had no answers. I had no idea how the man ended up under my car. The paramedics rushed him to the hospital, but later I learned he didn't make it. He died before he could say more than those desperate pleas for help. The police found no clues, no ID, no sign of how he ended up there. It was like he appeared out of nowhere. Even now, I can't explain it. Every time I get in my car, I think about that night and the man under my car. It's a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected things can happen, and we may never know why.